And we're live.
All
Great.
right. Hello, everyone. Uh,
Hello.
I'm David, founder
I'm
of
Farzad.
Stately. We have Farzad
Sorry, I'm
here too.
interrupting you.
No, you're all good. All right. So, in lieu of office hours today, I thought that we would do a fun stream where we talk about command palettes just because there are so many interactions in the Stately editor, and we really wanted like an easier way to do things like adding states, finding states and transitions, doing other actions and things like that. And so from the very beginning, we actually have designs over a year old for this, but we wanted to create a command palette. And there's a lot of existing solutions today. Here, let me go ahead and share one of them. This is probably the most popular, or I don't know if it's the most popular one, but it is pretty popular. It's a library called CMDK, which stands for Command K. And the cool thing about Command K is that it's just pretty simple to use. We'll look at the documentation real quick. And this is actually something that we started using until we, just ran into a couple of roadblocks. And I decided over winter break to sort of just see what it would look like to create it in XState. So the way that Command K works is that it uses React context and it uses compound components. I think they're called compound components.
Yep.
Yeah. So these like command input, it's going to read from the overall command context. You have a list here. You could also have groups of things, and you have items. And so when you press Command K, you're presented with all of these items where the first item is selected. But once you start typing, you see that all of the items that don't match it disappear. So if I type a Y, you're going to see that two items appear. We have YouTube and Raycast. And this is important actually because we're not just doing a simple string matching thing. This actually uses a library called score command or something like that in order to sort of fuzzy search and see which one matches it the best. So if I do YO, it's YouTube. YA, that's Raycast, even though the Y and the A aren't next to each other. And then you also have the arrow keys, so you could go up and down. And what I also discovered is that you could press Command down to go to the very end and Command up to go, just up here. So, I thought that was really cool. And the library that they have, it is very flexible where you could use it for a bunch of different things. And the reason that I actually started looking into the source code was actually because there was a bug. The bug is fixed, but you were sort of in an impossible state where, let's say that you weren't selecting anything. You have the first item by default selected, and then you started typing input. So what would happen over here is that the button, so the first item that was selected, would still show over here instead of input. And they recently fixed that bug. In fact, our very own Matoush, he made a pull request to fix that, which was awesome. But yeah, so like I was saying, I took a look at the code base, and just for fun over winter break, I was like, what would it look like to sort of port this over to XState so that we could have this command palette functionality and logic and make it available for pretty much any framework? So I just did a bunch of talking. I know Farzad has been interested in this idea of using command palettes for a long time now as well. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and
I
share
can
the
confirm
other.
that.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and share the other screen. And yeah, so we also wanted to take the idea of command palettes even further, which we will show you in a minute. So let me switch over to VS Code. All right, and hopefully it's showing the right screen. Okay. So this is actually new to Farzad just because I was late in sharing it. So feel free to ask any questions you want. But I'm going to work a little bit backwards. This is our very simple demo command palette where by default you have the first item selected. And once you start typing, so if I type T, we have 4 choices, 2, 8, 10, and 12. You could also press the arrow keys to go down and to go up. And you still have focus over here. So you could type as you press the arrow keys, just like that. If you press Command or Control on Windows and up or down, it's going to take you to the first and last items of the entire list. And then there's also one of the strange things about like a command palette code base or logic really is you have the concept of something that's selected, like 7 over here, and then something that's changed or like, set as a command or executed. I don't even know which verb to use for it, but basically there's a difference between having 5 selected and when I press enter, having 5
Executed.
Yeah, executed. I think that's a great word for that. So this is a very simple example where we could just experiment with going deeper and deeper. So I could like type 6, I type 7, could go here, I could do that. I'm typing my phone number. Just kidding. This isn't my phone number, but this is just a very simple example. Oh yeah, and right now it doesn't show anything if there are no results, but
So what would escape do here if you press it?
Escape does nothing. And so the reason it does nothing is because it didn't do nothing in the CMDK code base.
We probably need to preserve that if you like render the command palette inside the model or something to dismiss that.
Right, exactly. And I was going to pull up like the full editor here, but I'm just going to show you the inspector for now. And also because I have a development version of the editor I'm working on and I forgot to change it back. But the machine is pretty simple right now because all we're doing is, we have a bunch of events here. And these are all the things that could happen in this command palette machine. So like I said, we're working backwards. I just showed you a demo of the UI. So now we're going over the machine. And much of this is copy and pasted from Command K. And what I did was I actually did a little bit of cleanup because some of the logic that was in Command no longer applies when you make it general. Like a lot of the logic in Command K was specific to HTML rendering. What it's actually doing is it's reading each of the HTML elements for attributes and values and things like that. And so instead we have a data first approach where we just store it in an array. But anyway, so the things that happen are we have a next, which is going to go down the list, prev, which goes up, last, which goes to the bottom. And there is no first. We're just, setting it to the first one, but there arguably should be a first one. There's a key down event. And so this key down event, this is actually really interesting, and it's a good XState technique. I'll actually show you what's happening. So let me go into the command palette. By the way, feel free to stop me with any questions. I'm just basically doing a show and tell over here. Okay, so over here we have on key down, and is this big enough or should I make it bigger?
Yeah, it looks good. Okay,
awesome. So on key down, what we're doing is we're sending the events directly, and this is really as extract event. This is our command event and type, or so we don't need a type. It's just a key down event. Thanks, Copilot. Yeah, okay. So we're sending that event as is. Now, a lot of times what we would do is we would say if event.key is escape or arrow up or arrow down, things like that, then we would send it different events. But here's a cool little XState trick. You actually don't need to do that. You could send the event such as key down, and then within that, you could use guards or some other mechanism to raise events instead. And so that's exactly what I'm doing over here. So let's look for the key down event. Key down. I also have something new here, which I'll explain in a minute. This was also an experiment. This winter break was just a bunch of experimentation, but you could think of capture as pure. It's something that allows you to capture actions instead of having to push it into an array. That's the only difference. So, and I actually found it really, really useful. So when we get the key down event, depending on what was pressed, we even have Vim, Vim key bindings, and this is directly from Command K. But depending on which key was pressed, we're going to raise an event. So raising an event, if you're new to state machines and state charts, that's basically the state machine or state chart sending itself an event in the same step. So it's not going to be like a delay. It's essentially 0 time. It happens as part of that same processing step. So it's really, really useful. So we have arrow down, which is going to send, or it's going to raise the next event. We have arrow up, which is going to raise the prev event. And so those events, next and prev, I think I was experimenting more with capture. Yeah, I was. And so depending on what was pressed, so if the meta key or the command key was pressed, then we're going to do the last action, which is going to basically go to the very end of the list. And similarly, the next action is going to increment it by 1. And that's what this update selected changes. I'm not going to go through all the code, but yeah, this is basically copy and pasted from CMDK. So yeah.
I wonder how much of that copy-pasted logic can be converted into XState native actions and guards. Basically translate the if and else and branching that you have into XState config.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it could be. So the reason I did it this way was just because I want to get things up and working really quick. And so this is essentially all copy pasted. But you're absolutely right. Like all of these, like case P, case K, these could be guards instead of it being in a big switch statement. That's definitely.
Yeah, it feels like having a state machine inside another state machine right now.
Yeah, exactly. So, we could definitely model that as explicit states. But yeah, so I'm going to show you.
So I have a question for you, David. I know that this is just a show and tell, but probably some people are thinking, if you only have a single state in this machine and everything else is just actions and guards and stuff, then what's the point of converting this into a state machine? What's the benefit now?
So the benefit, actually, I'll show you. When I visualized this, I was like, oh, hey, there's only one state. Here's something that actually CMDK, I think, has this a bit, but again, it's based on HTML, so it sort of works naturally, but not explicitly. What I'm talking about is, let's say that we have a list of items. So I'm going to go back to our simple browser, but let's say that these lists of items need to be fetched asynchronously. So we could either hard code some logic in there, to just be like, okay, execute this promise. But what we could also do, let me just collapse everything just to show you, is we could do this. We could say initial, like let's just call this ready. And so we could have a few states. By the way, Copilot is amazing at state machines. We could also have something like loading. And so now we actually have something where these events shouldn't really do anything unless they're in the ready state. So all we have to do is move those all over there. And oh, sweet, no errors. So everything is going to work exactly the same. But now I added the capability to load data if I wanted to. And so let's just simulate this really quick, just because this is going to be really, just pretty fun to do. I'm just going to simulate it by using after. And let's say that after 2000 milliseconds, we go to the ready state. So let's try that out. Reload.
It's probably because we're still showing items, yeah.
Right, yeah, we're probably... Oh, by the way, this is red because TypeScript is complaining that the union type is too complex. It shows up and it disappears. It's very, very random, but, I don't know exactly what's going on over there. But yeah, so instead of this, we could say state.matches loading. And well, let's just have a nice little loading div. And then we have state.matches ready. And then we could show that unordered list. Okay, so it's going to wait 2 seconds, and then it's going to load that data. And then so you could see that we really didn't have to change much. We just made 2 states now. We have a loading state and we have a ready state. In fact, what we could do is we could have a, let's call this initial, like, and naming things is hard. So with items, and then we have with items. I mean, this is actually pretty unnecessary, but we could have an empty state as well. And this is only useful if you really need to do certain actions only if you're in an empty state, but otherwise this is derived state, so you really don't need that. But that's just another example of where a state machine could be really handy. And so another thing that I thought about, just to answer your question even further, is that let's say that you're typing something, and we have this idea too where you would type something, and this might be a command that has subcommands. So let's say that one of these things was create a new issue, and then when you create a new issue, you would have like these fields that you could enter. So now you're in a different child state of ready, where you're entering data into the fields instead of into the input itself, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, some commands can be complex, as you said, and probably need like a multi-step form rendered there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and probably the best example of this is if you go into Discord. Sometimes there are some slash commands where linear has one, for example, where you do /linear, and it would ask you for the message title, the message description, the message team, and those would be subfields in there. And so you're not entering that in the main input, you're entering that in like smaller areas of that input. So,
and yeah, having a state machine to distinguish between those substates and the rooted states is going to be really beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the idea here is if you have the state machine, right, the implementation can scale as the requirements scale. Yeah, but it's not easy to do that imperatively.
Mm-hmm. So let's visualize this now. Cool. So we could see that now we have loading data and we have ready data. And so all of these things are only going to be available when you're in the ready states, because we don't, obviously you shouldn't be able to change these things when you're still loading data. And in fact, I sort of want to build that real quick, but we might not have time to, like the whole async data loading. But I just want to show you like just how easy it could be to add that. Also, if you wanted like a more full experience, like actually this is something that we could do. So right now we're in the initial loading states, but instead we could be going to call this closed. So we're in the closed state, and now we could say on, what do we call it? Key command or keyboard shortcut.
I still don't know what you're trying to do.
Okay, let's do chord. Because so what I'm trying to do, sorry, I should have explained. I'm trying to model, we don't want this to be open until you press Command K.
So you want the coordination, like a keyboard binding. Got it.
Exactly. So, in fact, what I'm going to do is I have another window open. I'm going to cheat and look for what the implementation of that is in. Oh, wait. So here's the funny thing. In CMDK, it actually doesn't open on Command K by default. Instead, they give you just some example code to do that. So I'm just going to copy and paste that example code over here. But check this out. First of all, I'm going to add that event. And I promise we're going to have an easier way of doing this in the future. This is just going to be Command K. So this represents when you press the K key with the command modifier on it, it should transition it to the ready state. And also, Farzad, you mentioned the escape key. So I think we should add that too. So, and this is great because we could just, these are just events. on the state chart. So on escape, closed. So now we have two things to add. We have Command K and we have escape. So I'm copying and pasting some code from use effect, our favorite hook in the world. Oops. So I'm going to add that import. And so over here, they're literally setting is open. So instead of that, we are going to just send type. And now we have some choices. We're going to choose Command K. So this hook, all it does is it adds a key down event listener and it removes it when we're no longer in the command, because it's good to clean up our stuff. So let's also do that for, I mean, we could definitely abstract this hook out, but I'm being lazy, so I'm just going to copy and paste it. If escape key.
Why don't we do it in the single listener?
You're right. Well, is the escape key a key down or is it a key press?
It's a key down.
Okay. Well, then it'll work.
If you really want to escape, you press it.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
And we called this ESC. Okay, cool. So our logic is this. It's going to be closed until we press Command K. And then when we press escape, it's going to go back to being closed. So very simple state machine, but let's see if it actually works. So right now it's closed. If I press Command K, it opens. If I press escape, it closes. Oh man, this is awesome. I promise you I'm pressing those keys. So, and I'm going to press escape and it's closed. So pretty awesome. Oh, that's funny. When it's closed, I can't type anything, which I guess sort of makes sense. Not really.
You know, David, one of the features that would actually show the benefit of having XState model this whole command palette is if your subcommands need to be loaded from a server too, if all of them are async.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. Because yeah. So when you press enter or when you click on something, a change event occurs. And so this change is basically saying, regardless of what's selected, change it to this item. So I'm pressing enter, and then you get to decide what happens over there. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We could say when something changes, here is a new promise, and then we could use that promise to fetch additional data and just go deeper and deeper. So yeah. So I guess the last thing that I want to show, because a command palette is cool. It's not too difficult to build. It's honestly one of my favorite, things to see in any website. It just makes things a lot easier because you have one nice centralized place to have all of your events. And something similar to that is, like we've been talking about for a long time, state machines and state charts, where you basically have all of the states and events available to you. So I'm going to show you something I experimented with. This is called Stately command, and I hope it works because we did change a few things, but that's okay. So first of all, let me show you what's actually happening over here. This, all it's doing, and it's amazing how little code was involved in making this, but it wraps command, and we need to provide it items. So what we're doing is we have a state machine, and this is just your basic traffic light machine. I could open the inspector and let you see what that looks like. So on timer, we go to yellow. On timer, we go to red, and then we go through the process of letting pedestrians walk. And then it goes back to. It's going to go to red blinking. And currently there's no way out except for this on done, which is supposed to be an internal event, but I forgot to add that. But anyway, all of our items are mapped from those next events. And so if you're new to XState, next events basically tells you what can happen next. And this is something that's pretty much impossible to do with any other state management library, because you don't have that, that list of things. It's very hard to extract it unless you somehow read the AST of the switch statements. You can't easily extract that. So when we press Command K, now we have all of our options that are available. We have emergency and we have timer, the two events that are possible from the green state. So if I go to timer and I press enter, now it shows you that we're in the yellow state. I don't know if you could see it that well. I'll try to zoom in. Can't really zoom in, but you get the idea. Actually, let me make this a little bit bigger. Font size. By the way, we're using Chakra, which is great. Okay. It's not letting me go any bigger. So even if I do 2XL. Okay, I guess that is a little bit bigger. 4XL? That works.
That's big enough.
All right, awesome. So again, I could press Command K, and now I have a choice. Timer. Now we're in the yellow state. And so I'm going to press timer again. It's already selected, so I could just press enter. And then I could just keep going through the things, countdown start, countdown end, and then, we're done. So now it goes back to green. And if I type like EGY for emergency, I could press enter, and now we're in the red blinking state. And so while this seems like a contrived example, this actually really means that any complex multi-step workflow that you want to represent in a command palette is just as easy as making an XState machine. Like, I'm doing no extra work here in order to display all of the options in the command palette and show the state, and it just works. So it's pretty exciting.
You know what it reminds me of the old RPG games that you used to use in terminal, text-based ones, that you had to, like you could go east, west, north, and east, then you hit a troll or something. It was exactly like this, that you had a list of next events that you could dispatch.
Yeah, but that's exactly it. So it's sort of like a choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
Actually,
you probably
I really like I really like that idea. Go on.
Yeah, I wanted to say you probably it's safer for you to filter that by a state.can in case you have guards, because all those next events might not actually lead to a transition.
Yeah. That is a good point. Hold on. So okay, let's try that out here, because I want to just try it. So you're saying, let's say that only if emergencies are allowed do we want to allow the target. So this is a cond, and so we'll just call this true because emergencies are allowed. But actually, let's make it false. No emergencies allowed. So the problem is it still shows. So you're saying instead of state.next events, we should filter that.
Mm-hmm.
So filter, and so again, this is another XState feature, but we could return state.can, and then we just pass that event in. That's it. And so now when we open it up, oops, still have that. All right, I did have it to false. All right, let's I
mean, we showcased it, probably caching the server or something.
Yeah,
don't worry about that. But this is the idea.
Oh, wait, there, it works. Sorry, yeah, you're right, it was cached or something. So now if I do Command K, we could still do the emergency. Well, actually, no, we can't do the emergency event because the condition is now false. But now, we could just do all this, and you could see that we're actually, there's the concept of disabling an item. So all you have to do is pass in disabled. And then I'm saying if it starts with done dot, which is an internal event, then disable it, which in our case means not showing it. But yeah, so let me re-enable that just to try it out and reload. So now if I open this, we have our emergency back again. So There we go. Now there's no way out of the state, which it seems like a cool feature that Farzad would build. Farzad has been responsible in the editor for a lot of just checking whether states are reachable, whether states are invalid, like just validation in the state chart. And so something that a state chart also makes pretty clear is when, trying to resize this, when it's not possible to escape a state. So for example, if we're in emergency, oh, not sure why I can't toggle it. Let me get rid of this for now. If we're in the emergency state, then of course we have this on done, but let's say that we didn't have it on done. Ideally, something should tell you, hey, this state is impossible to get out of. So we could definitely detect that. So that's my little feature request.
Yeah, we can do a lot in the area of graph analysis on the state chart. Yeah, actually, we have plans.
Yeah,
so a lot of them.
we have a lot of plans. Too many plans.
Yeah,
but yeah. So I guess one of the things, and I love your thoughts on this too, is one of the things that I'm most excited about regarding this is not only just being able to use it in our editor for a lot of things, but also we were talking about focus mode, if you remember, last year a lot. And so with focus mode, you don't see the entire state chart. All you see is exactly what you see here. The current state, maybe some context, maybe some actions that have executed, and the next events that you could do, or basically every transition that goes out of that state. And so having a command palette and just wiring it up with any XState machine, it provides you like a nice little, focus mode. So you could simulate a state chart just by doing this.
Yeah, that's true. I've done that before a lot of times myself. And one of the challenges, I don't know if we want to talk about this in this stream or maybe another time, but one of the challenges of doing this dynamically is how to filter out the events that are, for example, private. Or because sometimes there should be a way to mark the events that, hey, these are like enumerable or they need to show up. There should be a flag for that. But yeah, we can think about that.
There really should, because when like we have the idea of raised events in a state machine, and of course this makes use of it. I wouldn't expect, I'm trying to see, actually all of these can be public events like previous, next, etc. But there are some events that should be internal, and so you should be able to say, hey, these shouldn't be part of the next events array. Yeah, that's I don't know. Right now it's easy enough to do in userland. Just filter it out.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's all you have to do. We see that Cedric, hey Cedric, in the chat, excited about focus mode. Yeah, trust us, we are too. So yeah, that's a small part of a lot of things coming soon. But yeah, this is basically, actually I'm going to visualize the command machine again. But yeah, I just want to show you, like, creating a command palette is pretty straightforward in XState. I am going to open source this. In fact, if you're keen enough, it is already on my David K. Piano repo, and I might move it over to the Stately one. Actually, I probably will. But I just want to show this as an example of how you could use the state chart to model a command palette. And what's really cool about this is the fact that you get to see in a very explicit way everything that could happen. And so if you wanted to, I haven't done this. This is more of an exercise for the reader. But for example, if you wanted to wire up these arrows to go to the next one or the previous one with something like CMDK, I don't think it's possible. But with something like this, it's all just an event. So when I press the down arrow, that's sending an event. And so that same event could be sent if you literally click a button, for instance. So state machines really make that kind of behavior configurable instead of tying it to a very specific structure or a specific framework. And so this is something that I definitely want to experiment with, which is just having this be in Vue or Svelte or Solid or other frameworks. So,
yeah, in fact, I think we can build the core agnostically so that everything else can be just adaptive on top of it. And we're probably going to use most of this code when we're building the command palette feature for the Stately Studio, which I'm hoping that will come out in this quarter.
Yeah. And I feel like it will, because we need it in so many different areas. Like even generically, just as a I know we have a few users who have a lot of machines and a lot of states, and having a list of them is hard to scroll through. And instead, if you could just have a just sort of a dynamic list where you could just type what you want and then select from there, that's a much better user experience. But I want to show you real quick, like what that command looks like, or sorry, what that hook looks like. So use command palette. It's taking items and on change, and it's returning these two things. And so when you're creating generic hooks, these are really the only two things you need to send. You need to return. You need to return a way to read some sort of state and a way to send events back. And that's pretty much it. So I'm using the command machine as a brain, so to speak. I'm feeding it the items. These things, list ID, input ID, and label ID, these are for accessibility. And I didn't get a chance to go through that, but let me see if I could find it. Oh yeah, so we have like functions like whatever. We haven't had time to go through it, but yeah, I have functions that all they do is return accessibility properties, so ARIA properties, and so it uses these IDs in order to do that. And then so we're basically just hooking things up to this brain, which is the command machine, and we don't need this console log. And whenever the items update, I'm letting my state machine know by sending it an event. It's a pretty standard pattern. And so we're just consuming that in the hook. And so you could even customize this further. So you don't need to return this. You could return, let's say you want to do items, state.context.items. You could do that. And then if you want to, basically have an easy way to go to the next one, you could just have this be that. And so on. And then when you consume the hook, you could just say const, items next equals use command palette, and then all of your items. And then, you could say button on click equals next. And that's pretty much it. So even if your users aren't, or your developers aren't used to using XState or anything, it's pretty simple to make a convenient API that you could use in whichever way you want. So yeah, and I didn't get a chance to clean that up yet, but that's the idea.
About the fuzzy search, David, are you using the same library that Command K, the CMDK library, uses?
Good question. Yeah. So it's a library called Command Score, and in fact, it was a single file, and it was written in JavaScript. So instead of installing a dependency, I did the sort of the open source thing, but like the OG original, or the OG open source thing, where I copy pasted the code and I converted it to TypeScript. And so it's the same library.
Okay, looks great.
Yeah,
dig into that.
I don't understand half this code. I just converted it to TypeScript. And I guess there are some parts where we could clean it up. The reason I felt safe doing that was because the library wasn't updated for months, which means it's working pretty well. So I'm like, okay, we could just import this library as is. But
or abandoned, but you can interpret differently. Yeah. But yeah, I'm just joking. All right. It's probably stable.
Yeah. Well, while we have a few minutes, Cedric asks, is it possible to focus transitions too? I mean, on your first example, we have a lot of transitions on the same state. This is pretty common to manage a form. So yeah, I can imagine, like, let's say that you're creating a checkout form and you have a shipping state. And in that shipping state, you could enter the address, the city, the country, the postal code, just a whole bunch of things. So I would say that next events would come in pretty handy for that, but those only show the event types. They don't show like the different fields that you could put in there. And that's actually why, this might be for another video, but I introduced a while ago something called schema. And so schema is a place for, for example, JSON schema to live inside of your machines. So be an example. So I could say over here, schema, and then we could just have some sort of JSON schema over here. So we could say events, next, description. Let's see if Copilot helps me out. Yep, select the next item, type, object. There's no properties, so this is pretty much going to be empty. But anyway, you could do a JSON schema type of thing here, and this is going to exist on the machine as machine.schema. So if you have properties over here and you say, I don't know, like just name, this could be type string, give it a description, the item's name or something like that. And so what you could do is you could render a form using JSON schema for that. And there are libraries like RJSF that exist for you to do that. So I think we'll say that for another stream, but it is possible to do that.
Yeah, this enters the area of dynamic form rendering, right?
Yes, which is also really exciting because once we get to that point, which again, it's possible, I've done demos of it before, it becomes possible to just create a machine that describes your app logic and basically have a prototype already rendered from that. So you don't need to do extra work setting up the UI. Now, the UI generated from that might not look exactly the way you want, but it's going to have everything available for you so that it still works as a functional prototype. So, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. I'm thinking I had another question. Yeah, about the focus mode, I think I can already envision that you should be able to probably select any custom nodes you want off the canvas and then enter them all at once into the focus mode. Similar to how you can, drag and drop a window on Mac when you want to record a screen or something. Anything custom. It shouldn't be just a transition or just a state node.
So you're talking about focus mode specifically?
Yeah, I was just circling back to Cedric's question.
Mm-hmm. yeah, there's a lot of ideas to be had there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're running up on time. Any last thoughts?
If you have any ideas of what we should be streaming on, any sort of thing that we need to build with XState to showcase, just let us know.
Yeah, and this was a really fun example. Again, I'm going to clean it up probably this weekend, open source it. Just because I want to see a command palette that's usable in any framework. And Farzad has been asking for this for a while too. So yeah,
that's true. All right. Have fun, everyone.
Yeah, thank you all for watching.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.